Here we are, part 3 in this beginner series. Don't worry if you haven't watched the first two, it's not required, but I'll leave links below if you're interested. So we've been talking about taking our ordinary pen doodles and pen drawings up to the next level. In video number 1, we took our doodles up a notch using stippling, and here are some examples. In video number 2, it was all about hatching. And we used hatching in just the most basic of ways. So now that we've gotten the hang of using one or the other, let's integrate both stippling and hatching into a single doodle. There are two main things I like to consider when deciding which method to use, and I think the mushroom and the flower will demonstrate both of these reasons nicely. So grab a pencil with an eraser, a pen and some paper, and let's begin. I'm starting with a pencil outline, but jump right in with pen if you want to, if you feel comfortable. So I'm doing my best to keep the second drawing fairly close to the first so that we have an accurate comp when we're through. And onto the flower. I'm picturing my flower with a dark center and those bright yellow petals, so I believe my flower would be a one-eyed Susan, though I guess no one will know that since it's in black and white. And I like to vary my petals some. I don't want them all to look exactly the same. So they're different sizes and slightly different shapes. Some of them will have like a little nick out of the end or a little fold here and there. And let's not forget those little details that we had in the initial doodles. We want to keep it as close to the first one as possible for now. All right, now for the pen outline. I really prefer to use the size 005, which is a 2mm, but for the sake of time, I'm going to go ahead and use the 08 size for now. And if you aren't under any time constraints, I highly recommend using the 005 for the black micron fine liners. Give that smaller tip a try and see what kind of amazing effects you can create. So if you've watched the first two videos in the series, then you know that these tips we'll be covering are meant to be used on the doodles that you already feel comfortable with. So if you have like a favorite plant drawing or a goofy little cat that you always find yourself sketching, then use those. See if you can take them up a notch. And notice how I'm not too worried about getting my pen outline perfectly lined up with the pencil marks. They're just a guide, nothing more, so don't stress. And once again, those little details. And now we're just going to erase all the pencil marks. And now for the meat of this video. Okay, so the first thing I consider when deciding to use stippling or hatching is shape. And I like to break my drawings up into sections. So we'll be looking at the mushroom cap, then this little fringe area, the mushroom skirt if you will, and the bottom section. And because the mushroom cap looks like a fairly irregular shape to me, I'm choosing stippling. And this will allow me to easily work over those bumps and lumps. With a make-believe light source in the top right vicinity, I'm going to focus most of my attention on the left side and the bottom. My dots are closer together here, creating a dark value. And now let's talk about the second thing I consider when deciding to stipple or hatch. I like to take the texture of the item in mind. So with the mushroom cap and its spots and its bumps, adding dots to show shadows and depth makes a lot of sense. We're working with the texture, not against it. And just to add a little more texture, I love going around the outline, and I just use a really shaky hand and I add those little dots and specks here and there. And the more imperfect this part is, the better. Moving on to the fringe, I'm more confident in the shape of this section, knowing that directly under the cap, the surface will be somewhat smooth. I also know that the lines will work well with the already existing texture. We don't need to recreate the wheel, we're just working with what we already have. I think I'll go back through and darken the left side and the part immediately under the cap, since these areas will be more shaded. And now for the bottom portion, We could use contour hatching and work around the shape of the base, but I think I'll stick with stippling. When in doubt, I turn to stippling. And once again, the left and the bottom will be darker, and I'll be leaving the right side lighter. I'm adding some texture to the grass and ground by going over it with a shaky hand. And let's also throw in a bit of hatching for the shadow. And you can also do some cross hatching here if you're feeling really brave. So there we have it, before and after. Now let's evaluate the shape and texture of the flower. Starting with the center, not only does it have a lumpy, inconsistent surface, but the texture pulls me towards stippling. Light on the top, light on the right. Dark on the bottom, dark to the left. Picture that light source as you work your way around. Now how about these long petals? Smooth, consistent surface? Hatch lines could work with that, especially with that center line that naturally occurs in nature on these petals. So I'm going to be adding short lines to the ends, and then I'll draw in longer flowing lines from the center. I'm sure you can see where that fine tip pen would definitely come in handy about right now. So as I work, I'm keeping in mind where my darker values need to be and which areas I need to leave light. And then I also just like to throw in a little more interest, some little dots and specks here and there. For the leaf, we could go either way, lines or dots. In fact, hatching might be better suited for the smooth surface, but I do like the subtlety that comes from stippling, so that's what I'm going to be using. And I suppose that would be a third thing to consider when making the decision to use hatching or stippling. How subtle or how bold do you want that portion of the drawing to be? I find it's much easier to keep areas subtle with a fine tip pen and a light sprinkle of stippling. Okay, so how did we do? I'm pretty happy with the results, and I think it's safe to say that we did indeed take our doodles up to the next level. Now I challenge you to look in your notebook and pull out a page of your favorite doodles. Consider shape, study texture, think about bold versus subtlety. What can you add to your already established pen drawings to improve the overall look and bring more depth and interest to your artwork? Well, that's all I have for today. Thank you for watching.